So I'm assuming the mic is on. Can you all hear me? Excellent. Well, welcome. My name is William Dries. I'm the Principal Deputy Director for Studies and Analysis in the Office of the Secretary of the Air Force in the Pentagon. And welcome to this panel of my august colleagues, all of whom I've either worked for or with at one time or another. But as we begin this panel, I ask you to please silence your cell phones at this time, double check them. You don't want to be that one. And thank you for attending and welcome to this special event, a conversation on training with DAF leaders. Today we have the honor of the following from my left, your right, welcoming Lieutenant General Clark Quinn, the Commander of Air Education and Training Command. Next to him is Lieutenant General David Tabor, Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Plans and Programs, the A8. Next to him we have Brigadier General Matt Cantori, Deputy Commander for Space Training Readiness Command with STARCOM. Next to him we have Mr. Thomas Lawhead, SES, Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategy, Integration, and Requirements, the A57. And on the far, at the other end of the dais from me is Mr. Shane Sheehy, SES, the Director of Future Operations, the A35. The theme of this year's conference, as you've heard many times, is optimizing training, ensuring operational dominance. On the specific category of readiness and training, Secretary Mink, Secretary of the Air Force Mink, said he knew that, quote, there was a readiness challenge. I didn't appreciate how significant that readiness challenge was. Our focus must be on efficiency, squeezing every benefit out of every piece of equipment and dollar the department has, referring to the training and activities required to maintain a ready force. Secretary Mink went on to emphasize the ability to survive and operate in contested environments. And as everyone probably knows, our potential adversaries are rapidly innovating and progressing, creating that contested environment, making it worse with each passing day. He also emphasized the need to push industry to improve the availability and reliability of spare parts. As the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Wilsbach, recently stated, Air Force's mission is to fly and fix and fight. Adding that fix element, as a combat aviator for many years, every jet you bring back typically needs to be fixed, and that requires parts. And if they don't have them, then the jet stays broke. And finally, he highlighted initiatives to better leverage the data that we already have. The Air Force and the Space Force are swimming in data. We have a lot of it. Having it, curating it, making good use out of it is a constant challenge to us. And on readiness, I'll just say a couple quick things before I let the panel introduce themselves. When I think of readiness, I think of a quote from an old Wizzo I flew with who said, when the balloon goes up, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fight as you trained. And I think that's very true. And then I have another quote from this morning, which I thought was germane. I actually took a picture of it here. By Mr. Ritchie, he said, operational dominance is an infinite game. It requires continual rapid technology insertion and training and education to take full advantage. And that training and education tends to be a lagger, and that's a big part of what affects our readiness going forward. So now I ask that each panel member, starting with General Quinn and moving to his left, introduce themselves, provide their roles and responsibilities, as well as providing a few minutes of opening remarks on the theme of the conference and big picture items like Secretary Mink's push for the need to perfect readiness, the need to modernize the Air and Space Force, and the need to take care of our people, and how these priorities relate to training. General Quinn.
Excellent. Thank you, Yeti. I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation to be on the panel. Great to be here with everyone today. I am Lieutenant General Clark Quinn, Commander of Air Education and Training Command, and that's based at San Antonio, Texas. I'll go through a little bit of what the portfolio for AETC does. I will tell you I've been in the seat as the commander for about 5 or 6 weeks. So I would love to be able to, plausibly deny not knowing anything, but I was the deputy commander for a year and a half prior to that, so I'm pretty familiar with what AETC does. If you came and visited our headquarters and you saw the doormat when you walk through, it's got the AETC logo, says Air Education and Training Command, and on the bottom it says Recruit, Train, and Educate. So that's what we do. So two of those words are key to this conference, right? Train and educate. We do recruiting for both the Air and Space Force. The Space Force is growing a recruiting base of their own, but right now it is total force recruiting. We do all of the ROTC detachments at all the different universities. We actually do junior, Air Force junior ROTC. We have officer training school. So if you are coming in as an enlisted member or an officer into the Air Force, unless you go through the United States Air Force Academy, you're going to come in and either be commissioned or trained in our basic military training. So that's the recruiting, the initial training part of it. Everything from boot camp, basic military training for our enlistees, to I talked about the commissioning sources. If you're going to be a firefighter, a jet engine mechanic, an admin troop, whatever that is, we will also give you that initial skill. So we get you commissioned, we make you an airman, we will give you some type of an initial skill in AETC, and that includes everything up to F-35 training. So from basic pilot training through F-35s, you're going to come through AETC. And then at the end game, that educate, we also have Air University and the Air Force Institute of Technology as part of AETC. So some PhD programs, some master's programs, School of Advanced Aerospace Science. There's multiple different schools. We have a university within AETC as well. So to what Mr. Dree's point was there with General Wilsbach, the fly, fix so that we can fight and win. We definitely do the flying, we teach the flying, we teach the fixing, we hopefully teach the fighting, and then ultimately we have to hand those folks off. We don't necessarily do the winning in AETC, but what I will say is that we cannot fly, fix, fight, and win unless we recruit, train, and educate the best airmen that this nation has to offer. It's the way that we keep our competitive edge. As far as the theme of the conference and Secretary of the Air Force Mink's comments on the importance of readiness, obviously I wholeheartedly agree with that. Some of the opening panels that I saw this morning that hopefully many of you were in as well, a lot of the focus was on things, acquiring synthetic environments. AETC is much more of a people command. We develop people. Now, I need some simulated environments. I need some other items. I need tools to do that, but ultimately my readiness focus is on providing ready airmen to the combat air forces to be able to go out and execute the assigned missions. And those simulated environments, again, I'll just throw one teaser out. We've got a long time to talk. We've got 82 more minutes, so I won't throw them all out right now. But when we talk about command and control, simulated environments down to the 6th degree of freedom for missile flyouts, let's go all the way to the other end of that, and I'm gonna build a recruiter for the United States Air Force. So I'm gonna take some great staff sergeant out of his or her operational field, and I'm gonna tell them they're gonna recruit for the next 3 or 4 years. Not all of our airmen are natural extroverts that are gonna go into an environment and just excel. So we actually have simulated environments where we teach them how to go into a high school, whether it's a friendly encounter with a guidance counselor or a student, or it's a more challenging one. So we, even at that level, we have simulated environments. It might just be a person on a screen talking, but again, it's the thought of simulating to be able to train. So thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.
General Tabor.
Great. Well, thanks for doing this, Yeti, and thanks to the organizers for putting this all together, inviting us to be here tonight. I'm Dave Tabor. I'm the DCS for plans and programs, and as the name would insinuate, we do plans and programs. I was, as a young officer coming up, I had a number of mentors who told me that eventually I needed to get into the programming world, and wise to my age, I said, I don't do that, I'm an operations guy. I finished my last command in Europe about 3.5 years ago, and they said, guess what, you're gonna go be the planner for the Air Force, or the programmer for the Air Force. I said, yeah, great. When I ran into one of my now retired mentors about 6 months later, I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. I didn't know what I was missing. He said, of course I was right. That's why I kept saying it over and over again. But my younger self would probably punch my current self in the face for saying it, but I've actually enjoyed this job. As I was talking with somebody earlier today, I mean, it is the place where you kind of have a unique view of the Air Force in a way that not very many other people do. It's where everything kind of comes together. And for good or bad, you affect a lot of those things, whether it is through the actual programming and developing the POM and deciding what gets funded through the corporate process, or as we have endeavored to do here more recently, kind of look out a little bit more effectively into the future to determine what are those choices that we have to make. But as a function of that, it becomes a place that is kind of the, as I call it, the nexus of friction internally as we make those internal decisions, but also friction externally in kind of concentric circles with the Joint Staff, with OSW, and critically with Congress as we actually submit a president's budget. So you really are kind of in the thick of things. But it is a cyclical process, and it's very predictable. It's more or less the same every year. There are obviously changes that occur along the way. There are always new bills that are coming in. There's never enough money to do everything that you want to do. There is, from time to time, new guidance, particularly when you get a new administration in, and they obviously want to do things a bit differently. And then there are delayed programs. All of those combine to put pressure on what is a relatively finite top line. I kind of have a theory, and probably all sitting eights look back on the past and think how good it was. But my theory is that kind of in the post 9/11 era of largesse, there was a lot of money going around. A lot of it came in the form of overseas contingency operations, OCO money, which is a little bit similar to the reconciliation dollars that we're dealing with today. But as a result, it was easy to get a lot of money for funding for things in support of the effort at the time. I would say that now that despite reconciliation, that era is kind of over. We are certainly in an environment of flatter top lines, long-term CRs, which we're in the midst of dealing with. And that's not really the stock recipe for success. To be fair, there are efficiencies to be taken in the process, and we're onboarding many of those recently. You've heard about acquisition reform, which is certainly not in my wheelhouse, but certainly abuts the things that we're doing in plans and programs. But at the end of the day, there are choices to be made. I won't even say there are trades to be made, because I'd insinuate some kind of equity between those choices. And there's not always equity in the choices that we have to make. In the past, in the not so distant past, we have had a very strong focus on modernization almost exclusively. And in fact, in a few years, actually that preceded my time in the building, we focused on modernization really at the expense of readiness. I'll say that in the last 2 years or so, we have pivoted and tried to get that balance a lot more closely aligned. And what it really means in practical terms is ensuring that we have the appropriate amount of program flight hours, facility sustainment, restoration, modernization funds, kind of the non-MILCON things, as well as really very critically our weapon system sustainment, so we can actually go and do the fixing, so we can do the flying that General Wilsbach has recently talked about. That said, old equipment is inordinately expensive to operate and very unpredictable in terms of generating the readiness. So at the end of the day, we still have this tension between modernizing to the Air Force that we know that we need for the future, while still retaining everything in those readiness accounts that we need to be effective. So that's just the world of the A8. I'll say that we are very interested in doing things much more efficiently, and General Quinn, I know, has a lot of others that he alluded to of technologies that we're looking to onboard, different ways of doing things, which we're already in the process of doing. I think a large part of that from my seat is the joint simulated environment. And as we get that finished and proliferated out there, that dominates a lot of our focus. But we're also very eager to see the advances in augmented reality, blended training. And I know that there's a lot of those technologies that are here today. So everything can't be a priority at once, so it does come down to balancing across all of our portfolios, and that's really what we strive to do. So with that as an opener, I'll pause there and hand it over to General Cantore.
General Cantore.
All right, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be with you here today, representing the Space Force on this panel. I got here and they handed me a pin, just like your first day at Disney World, saying first time attendee, and mine is a little strip, though, for my badge. So it's good to be here with this community and see the interest we have in not only those folks on the DAF focus, but also across the joint community and with our allies and partners. At Space Training and Readiness Command, which is readiness is right in our name, I'm the deputy commander working on behalf and with General Smith and Chief Pogue. We have a wide scope of responsibility. Day in, day out, we really break it down to two areas. One, we have to develop guardians, but then we also have to develop the capabilities. We have to validate those capabilities, and we put those together in a package that ultimately creates combat credibility for the Space Force. The Space Force is here to provide the Joint Force and our allies a set of skills and capabilities that didn't exist in the past. We have to fight for space superiority in the fight for the future, and we see that coming. And so that is much at the top of our priority list. And so if you go to the why now? Why this focus on Space Force? Yes, we're 6 years in, but the reality is it's based on the threat. We see what other nations are doing. We see what our peer competitors are doing. And if they became our adversaries, the challenges that they're going to face for our space systems. And our guardians have to be ready. Our systems have to be ready. That's our job to prepare them for that potential reality. The other aspect of that is that the Joint Force needs the Space Force to be successful. Although we may not have done combat in orbit in the past, it is going to be a reality in the future. And when we are called to act, we have to be excellent in our execution. There is no second try. And so the training and the readiness we build has to go hand in hand with that. So whether we're supporting the global space ops, things like position, navigation, timing, satellite communications, surveillance, reconnaissance, or supporting long-range kill chains that depend on space capabilities, we have to be there. That is our imperative as the Space Force. We also need to train like we fight. And this is a big transition that we're undergoing as a service. It's one that's, I think, no different than any other service has to struggle with. We have a lot of legacy capability that we are now pairing with some of the newest high-tech advanced systems. They fundamentally were not designed to operate together, and yet they must. They must with speed, with precision, and they need to be able to enable those end-to-end kill chains that we are trying to execute. And so to do that, we know that we need simulation-enabled training. For us, that actually equals operational readiness. The two go hand in hand. And so as we build out and advance our simulated-enabled training, that's how we're going to get our Guardians ready. We've got to break our silos. A lot of times we think about individual weapons systems or specific programs. Well, the reality is those have to work together. And not only do they have to work together across the Space Force, they have to work with our allies and partners, and especially within our DAF family. We need to test like we fight as well. So it's not just preparing our forces. We have to get our systems ready and put them through the same rigorous experiences so that we know that they are going to perform as expected. And we're trying to find this balance of synthetic versus live. And how do the two work together? There's a lot of things we know that we won't be able to do on orbit, whether it's because there's either policy limitations or it just doesn't make sense. We would run all the Delta V out of our spacecraft doing the reps and sets necessary for us to build readiness. So we have to find this balance between the two, and that's an area that we're working on as we go forward. So what do we need? We need your help. This community in particular is here to give us ideas. We know that within industry and within academia, there's ways that we can get after this. There may be technologies, whether it's small businesses or tucked away in other areas that we haven't found yet. We want to find those. We want our Joint Force and our allies and partners to tell us what you're doing. What are those opportunities so that the Space Force, 6 years in, doesn't have to relearn the areas that you've already tread in the past. And then finally, we want to make sure that we modernize with speed and discipline. We know that is an imperative for us as we go forward. So as I said, it's an honor to be here amongst this panel. Space Force may be the new kid in town, but it has to pull its weight when it's asked to perform.
Thanks. Mr. Lawhead.
Thanks, Yeti. Thanks to NTSA for the invite to come here and chat with you all today. If we ever get done with the introductions, we actually might have a chance to chat, as General Quinn mentioned. So I'm the Deputy 857 at the Air Staff, which encompasses strategy, concepts, force design, wargaming, requirements / capability development, and well, that does it. So what does that mean? We take the National Defense Strategy and distill it into an Air Force strategy. We take the Joint Warfighting Concept along with the rest of the services and distill that down to an Air Force Future Operating Concept, which this is a little bit like a Bible paraphrase, right? So the strategy begets a concept, the concept begets a force design, the force design begets a plan, the plan begets a program, et cetera. And then Shane gets to execute it all along with the STARCOM and AETC. So when we look at the National Defense Strategy and build an Air Force strategy and see what it is that the nation needs us to do as a joint force, we distill it down to the force design. Oftentimes when we think of force design, we think of force structure, which is part of force design, but the other parts of force design are, I would argue, equally important: posture, organization, training, airman development, which then brings the rest of this stage together on how each of those pieces impact the Air Force writ large. So force design itself is a critical piece of how we get to the future. How we get to force design is via wargaming. This is kind of the hook into ITSEC. There was a time where wargaming did its thing and modeling did its thing in a silo of excellence, and simulation did its thing, particularly in the training environment. I think what you see in the future is all of those cylinders coming together, both in terms of threat database, both in terms of interaction of information both ways between all those cylinders, so that what we do in wargaming, which starts to lead us into a force design, is available to the modeling and simulators, the campaign planners, et cetera, so that that data transcends use. You can bring your app to where that data is, and that data will affect your part of the job. The piece that we get out of wargaming for us is a chalk snap line. If I go back, gosh, just 2 years in wargaming, it would take us 6 months to set up a war game so that we could do one iteration over a week of 3 or 4 moves on a campaign, all adjudicated at human speed by smart people, right? But they were humans. And you know, we do 12-hour move during the day. The players would leave, the adjudicators would take over, they'd spend all night, and I'm getting some nods in the crowd here who've been there in those late nights. They'd adjudicate overnight and come to the conclusion, yeah, you won, you lost, here's the ships that you lost, here's the aircraft that you lost, here's what happened to red, here's what happened to blue, and the next move would happen. And at the end of a week, you'd have a Monte Carlo of 1 of what the future might look like. So we're trying to digitize that. And as we digitize wargaming, we're able to not just shorten the planning cycle for them, but we're actually able to speed up the execution cycle. We're not quite there yet, but last year in Global Engagement, our joint war game, we were able to do 6 different excursions, vice 1. We see that morphing into dozens of excursions during that week, and then being able to actually take that data. So if you scratch your head and come, wow, it looked like this capability that you used on move 2 really moved the needle. We can go back in and run it digitally and go, well, is more or less of that help? Are there any other variables there that change the outcome? And then really hone in on what the future force needs to look like. Then we can take that. One of our nascent force design capabilities is the human team that we're trying to work with AETC, with the Human Performance Wing, to go, okay, what's the airman of the future look like? If I'm going to drastically change Air Force force design and Air Force force structure, what airmen do I need to bring in? How do I need to train them to be able to operate and win in that kind of environment? The last question I would have in my mind in this stage is, well, there's the 3, the 5, and the 8. It's pretty obvious why STARCOM and AETC are here, but the 3, the 5, and the 8, that's kind of weird. If I go back in history, there was a time where it was an A58, there was a time when it was an A35, now it's a 3, a 5, and an 8. And the reason is there's gaps and seams between all of those 3 organizations. And what we have found particularly over the last several years, is that we do better as a service when we close those gaps and seams. So when we do a strategy, when we do a force design, when we start to do capability development, if we're not working with our partners in the 8 and the other services 8s, if we're not working with the 3, if we're not working with the trainers, we start down a path that isn't connected to the rest of the force. So what the future looks like, I think, is more and better integration between the 3, the 5, the 8, downstairs in the building, not here, but at the Pentagon with OSD, and to be able to continue to do those iterations on what that future force looks like. So great to be here today. Looking forward to your questions,
All right, great.
if we ever get to them.
We might. Mr. Sheehy.
I'll try to be brief. Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm humbled by it and very appreciative for being here. So I'm Shane Sheehy. I'm the director of the newly stood up A35. We stood up on the 1st of October, right in time for the shutdown to happen. So it's been a bit of a fits and starts as we've gone. Within the A35, we have Air Force Checkmate, which Brigadier General Cantori is an alumni of. Checkmate gets after the operational level of strategy and really getting after how we're going to fight today's fight with the kit that we have today. And then also within the directorate, we have integrated defense, and so that is counter small UAS, air-based air defense, and all the things that go along with that, and developing systems and fielding systems to protect our bases. And everybody's seen the news and knows what happened in Ukraine a few months ago, and so that's where our focus is protecting our bases, so something like that doesn't happen to any of our bases with small UAS. What we're going to focus on today is A35E, and that is operational tests and training infrastructure along with exercises. And so as we think about operational tests, infrastructure, the overarching theme that you're going to hear out of me today is that the things that we develop and the things that we do going forward have to be interoperable. When we have to have open architecture where we don't have proprietary systems that don't work together and don't talk to each other. And so, the kind of cornerstone of this as we think about focusing on readiness is the Joint Simulation Environment. And the Joint Simulation Environment, or JSE, is providing us an opportunity to train like we've never been able to train before, to train across multiple weapon systems in one simulated environment, to be able to focus on the high-end fight that we've done in stovepipes in the past, without it being as realistic as JSE is providing the opportunity for us to do, and allow us to really integrate and practice how we're going to fight in that simulated environment. There's, JSE is still being developed, and there's obvious shortcomings within JSE, but we think the way to get after the shortcomings is to work within the JSE framework and continue to develop out JSE as opposed to having disparate systems that are being developed outside of JSE that they'll never plug into that environment. And the simulator environment is obviously, has its advantages, but we also need to focus and put investment in our range infrastructure. And so we have NITR and JPark, which everybody knows about. We need to continue to work to optimize and enhance the capabilities and threat replicators on those ranges to provide the live fly experience in realistic training. Sorry, because we've got to have folks in jets doing those things because there's a different level to that with regard to experience. We also need to focus on range modernization, not just at the JPark and at NITR. We've got to focus on our primary training ranges and put money into that, because everything's not going to be an LFE, everything's not going to be a refor pack into the Pacific. We've got to have our crews be able to do sets and reps against realistic training so they can have those basic building blocks. So when they get to these large force exercises, it's not overwhelming to them, that they've got some of those kind of sets and reps already, and they'll be ready. They'll get much more out of these large force exercises. Additionally, we need to continue to work to expand our capability with regard to ADAIR. And so, there's obviously a pilot shortage in the Air Force, and every pilot that is getting in a cockpit and flying a red airline is not a pilot that is either being able to provide instruction as an IP to absorb and experience other pilots. And so, we need to continue to invest in ADAIR and all the things that brings. And then we need to optimize our airspace. And so we've got a lot of little chunks of airspace that we use. A base will have a MOA over top of it, and they work in that MOA. What we're trying to do is look at ways that we can be good stewards of the national airspace system and create complexes where multiple bases can go to those complexes and fly, and then give some of those smaller pieces of airspace back to the FAA. And then we can build out those ranges with those capabilities, so we have fewer but more capable ranges that are regionally available for use. And then finally, we'll look at blended capabilities of R&D. And we're committed to conducting the research to blended training. ACC and AFRL are already working, or they're sponsoring some R&D in this area. But to be honest, we haven't fully embraced it. There are some limitations to the blended solutions, and there's some challenges with both the air crew and the jet believing the capability of the blended solution. So I think that we'll get there in the future, but that's something that we need to continue to work on. And so in closing, as we go forward, we need to work on affordable and faster non-proprietary solutions that integrate into the systems that we have. We need devices that can remain current with OFPs and continue to upgrade as the jets upgrade and the software and the platforms upgrade. And then we need to be able to better leverage big data and AI as we go forward, and we need to do this all at speed and scale. So that's all seems pretty simple and easy to me.
That's all. Yeah, simple list. Thank you very much for those introductions. And for the audience, there's a QR code that you can use an app to ask questions, and they'll be looked at and brought to me at the end. I plan to leave about 20 to 30 minutes for questions from the crowd, but I have a few prepared questions myself. Many are in areas that have already been touched on. I would like the senior leaders here to build on some of the things they've already said as I go through a few questions here. So the first big category is just readiness in general. This first question is for Vulture Lawhead, and General Quinn in order. From a kind of a big picture NDS priority perspective all the way down to the AETC perspective. And the question is, can you speak to how the current Department of War's goals and priorities are realigning or changing DAF priorities and planning?
Yeah, so if I look at the National Defense Strategy, and in the specific case of the Department of War, the Interim National Defense Strategy, which is out, those goals align perfectly with the DAF priorities. In other words, we've aligned our DAF priorities to those goals. No big surprise. So what are those goals? Defense of the homeland. So homeland defense is critical. You've all, I'm sure, heard of Golden Dome for America. A huge piece of that will be not just the air dome, but the sensing dome for the Space Force and the missile defense dome, if you will. So think about the problem that General Gutlein is trying to solve in terms of Golden Dome for America, and that is counter everything from counter small UAS of some size for him, all the way out to and maybe including hypersonic glide vehicles. So that is a pretty huge subset of threat to defend against. We are well aligned to integrate all of that, to include the battle management and command and control of it as well with C3BM. The other big priority of the Defense Department is, of course, strategic deterrence, and no surprise that the Department of the Air Force owns two legs of the strategic deterrent, and we are modernizing both of those legs as we speak, as the Navy is with Columbia submarine as well. And then finally, power projection, the other big goal of the Department of War, and we will continue to be able to power project now and into the future. I think the trick there, and I'll end with, is power projection tonight looks different from power projection in the future, and that hasn't changed ever. What has always been a balance, and this is where we have to work with the 8 in particular, is what is a balance between readiness tonight and readiness for the future? In other words, can I still afford to be ready tonight and modernize so that I am ready in the future? And that really is kind of what keeps us working hard daily as we work with the 8 through that planning and programming bit.
Great. All right. I'm going to, I think, circle back to my opening comments about us being a people-focused command. So if the national defense strategy changes, if the Air Force strategy changes, if we buy new equipment, we're going to have B-21s flying around, we're going to have F-47s flying around. If the tactics change, from a fighter perspective, the tactics of 4th generation aircraft are very different than 5th generation aircraft. I don't know what 6th generation tactics will be, but I'm going to presume that those will be different as well. It is AETC's responsibility to provide trained and ready airmen, to be able to have flexible, dynamic syllabi that are responsive to the needs of the force. Regardless of what that NDS change is, we have to prepare airmen for it. There is a time and space challenge with that as well, because while we are fielding 5th and 6th generation aircraft, we're still training airmen for 4th generation aircraft, and frankly, we're doing it in 2nd and 3rd generation aircraft. But luckily, Mr. Stevens is going to help us with that with a new trainer here soon. So bottom line is producing trained and ready airmen. I will say that another tie to readiness, regardless, again, of what the NDS says, and going back to Secretary of Air Force's readiness, let's talk for a second about time in training. If I do an extreme example of, let's say you enlist in the United States Air Force for 4 years, and it takes me 2 years to train you to do your job. So 50% of your time in the military will be spent in training, only 50% operational. Believe it or not, there are a couple of very unique career fields where it takes almost 2 years to train some of our pararescue jumpers, some of our special tactics enlisted troops. If half of your time, now let's expand that. If that was true for everyone in a 300,000 person active duty Air Force, if everybody spent half their time in training, our effective strength would actually be 150,000. Clearly that's not the case. Our training programs are not that long. I use the extreme example to show that one of the ways that I can better ready our Air Force is to train to the same level, the same effectiveness, but be able to do it quicker. The faster I can get somebody out of a training program and into the operational Air Force, the more ready our Air Force will be.
All right, thank you. So that was kind of the ready for what, a little bit of how are we getting ready kind of the question. I'd like to direct this one to General Tabor, General Cantori, and Mr. Sheehy from a programmatic perspective and then from a service training perspective. And the question is, what is the readiness impact of the current Department of War refined priorities? In other words, how is it affecting our ability to produce and train the people and the things we need?
I guess I'll start. I think Vulture kind of hit on it. I mean, it's conveniently aligned with exactly what we would prefer to be doing. The question, of course, is will we get the resources to support it? I mentioned in my opening comments how we have kind of pivoted to balancing a little bit better the foundational accounts against modernization, both of which are very necessary. But the reality is that we need more. As General Alvin used to say, we need more Air Force. And that's not a plea for a larger top line across DoD. It is a plea for more resources to do the things that are being demanded of. So if that means that difficult choices have to be made elsewhere within the department, then so be it. But that's just the price of doing business. I think we're on a good path to do that, but it inevitably gets to the equipment that we are using to do that training. And we're certainly on the path of a number of acquisitions programs that will promise to improve our training. Even without those programs, we're changing some of the process by which we implement training and I think becoming much more efficient. Nevertheless, we have to have the resources to back up what we're being asked to do.
Yeah, so readiness is right in our name. And so aligned with the priorities from the Secretary, we are right there. We didn't have to shift too much, but 6 years into the service's growth, one of the things I think we are struggling with a little bit is we're trying to define that balance between modernization and readiness. We're thinking not only about the capabilities we have now, but we're actually thinking about the next gen and then the next gen capability after that. The development cycle is so rapid right now, it is a very fine balance between how quickly we focus on the future versus how much we focus on tonight. And so we are continuing to work through that as we grow. Right now, Space Force is 15,000 Guardians strong. It's going to grow. It's a question of how do we take those and assess them and grow them. That is part of the training dilemma that we have and is part of our charge within STARCOM to prepare that future force. So just as was spoken about, we've got to get the people ready and we've got to get the systems and try to find that balance as we go forward. A couple things that we're looking at, one though, is data and analytics. We're looking at how do we harness that? How do we use that so that we can customize the training experience for our Guardians? How do we get them ready quicker? How do we get them the experience they need to fill maybe gaps in their knowledge? We're looking at live virtual constructive environments, the arena. What is the perfect blend of the arena? A lot of work's been done on, and we've talked about synthetic, but virtual is also real is also an area where we are working. We have arenas that are in the orbital domain. We have the EM spectrum, and we also have the cyber domain as well. Those are all areas that we have to find ways to prepare that arena so that our Guardians can be ready. And we've got to find ways that we can actually tie those together in a live virtual constructive stance. And then finally, one of our biggest challenges is how do we take advantage of training, test, and tactics development opportunities concurrently? Finding that balance, we don't have the luxury of time to do them serially. So as we are able to put them on top of each other to gain experience, to bring young operators with more seasoned operators and gain that transfer of knowledge throughout the process, those are all areas that we're looking at as we go forward. But we're clearly aligned with the SecAf's direction.
Awesome.
One thing that I think is great about the Department of War's goals is they're very simple. And as General Tabor said, they're right in line with the things that we want to get after. And so it allows us to just be laser focused on heightening the importance of realistic training in both the simulated environment and in the live environment. And it drives us to continue investment into things like JSE and continue to drive investment into things improving our threat replication on our range complexes. But as General Quinn said, you know, the systems that we have that we're going to use to fight against adversaries today have to evolve at the speed of relevance, so they're available to fight tomorrow. So, you know, when we're, you know, fighting the 5th gen fight today and the 5th gen fight today and some of the 4th gen fight today, that's great, but we have to evolve and be able to fight the 6th gen fight, and it can't come 10 years after we're flying 6th gen fighters. And so the things that are developed have to move at the speed and scale so that they're relevant and they are actually enhancing warfighter readiness for the fight that we're about to get after. Thanks.
Excellent. We're going to stick with you, Shane. The next question is, with no extra resources, no additional money, this will be for you and General Quinn, General Cantori, you can chime in if you'd like. What innovative actions and initiatives have a high likelihood to increase readiness in the DAF without just throwing money at the problem?
Yeah, and I'm just basically, we're going to talk about the same things that I've already talked about, and I'm going to foot stomp JSE again. And we've got to field JSE at key locations and ensure that all future simulators, whether they're at the JITIC or they're the JOEs, the off-station simulators that tie in, that they are all able to tie into JSE and not have these one-off simulators. We need to continue to modernize our range complexes, both our large knitter and JPARC complexes, along with our primary training ranges, so we can get the aircrew the training and we can continue pilot absorption and pilot proficiency. We need to continue our investment into ADAIR. That fell off for some period of time, and now folks are seeing the benefit of ADAIR, and we need to get that adversary air at multiple locations, not just at Nellis, not just at JPARC, but in other locations where we can improve our pilot production and pilot absorption. And, you know, we need to optimize airspace so we don't have disparate ranges, especially those primary training ranges that have one-off systems in them. And you know, with the limited resources that we have, we need to focus our investment on getting threat replicators at those primary training ranges that are useful to multiple users as opposed to one-offs at various and disparate ranges. And then we need to continue to sponsor research and development into things like synthetic and blended capabilities and the things that, you know, like ACC is getting after with Project Juice.
All right, I'm going to kind of keep with my theme of, I promise I'll talk about synthetic environments and simulators here at some point, but I'm going to talk a little bit about people. So this is without additional resources, some innovative ideas of doing things differently. It's been mentioned a couple of times that there is a pilot shortage in the Air Force. I'm a product of the State University system of Florida, so just bear with me as I go through this. But if you look at the history of the United States Air Force from 47 to now, we've essentially always been getting smaller. So there were 1 million airmen at the end of World War II. Around the year 2000, we leveled out, and then 2001, we actually started climbing a little bit. There were always bumps. Korea, there was a bump. Vietnam, there was a bump. The Reagan buildup, there was a bump. But the overall trajectory was from 1 million down to 300-ish thousand. I would propose that perhaps we have always had a pilot shortage throughout our history. We just didn't care about it because we were always getting smaller. We were always having fewer and fewer pilots in our Air Force, but as long as the force is getting smaller, it doesn't become a big issue until we get to the year 2000, we try to sustain what we've got. So where am I going with this one? The current pilot training model, every instructor pilot is pulled from the operational Air Force, period. We do have some civilian simulator instructors. We have a few civilian flight instructors, but if every single instructor is pulled from an F-16, an F-22, a C-17, they are out of the ops force. That's a readiness impact because I'm going to take them for 3 to 4 years. They're going to lose their skill in their original major weapon system, and they're going to have to go through a requalification course. A team of very smart people before I got there looked at it differently and said, okay, what can we leverage either industry or academia to do? There are certain parts of flying in the military that are very specific military tasks. Perhaps flying low levels, flying formations. You could see, there's a couple different examples. There are other parts of flying in the military that are just general pilot stuff. Understanding what weather is, knowing how to fly around and navigate through GPS and VORs and TACANs and all of the stuff that the FAA and the ICAO and everybody else does as well. Flying an instrument landing system approach through the weather. Those are all skills that are not unique to the Air Force. Why am I pulling operational pilots out of the Air Force to teach things like that when I could use industry or academia to do it? And that is what we are doing now. And if you look back far enough to when there was an Army Air Corps, that's how we spun up to get enough pilots to fly in World War II. We used industry and academia. We used the predecessor of the Federal Aviation Administration, Part 141 schools. And that's what we're doing now. So ultimately, we're able to increase production and hopefully have a reduced demand and therefore increase readiness of the Air Force.
Excellent.
So for without resources, what are we doing within the Space Force? A couple things. Well, one is, you probably noticed I'm up here with my DAF partners. We're working hand in hand with the Air Force. This has been a great partnership. When you realize how small you are, you have no choice but to obligate. AETC is a tremendous friend of the Space Force, from basic military training all the way through many other areas where we partner with them through Air University and so on. We're going to continue that. I looked back at my, before I came out here, at my travel the past year. It's been, I guess, a little nice reprieve the last 2 months with the shutdown. But I realized the place I traveled to most of all locations in the last year was Nellis. Back and forth, back and forth. It's because the Warfare Center and the capabilities and ranges that Nellis helps harness for the Air Force helps harness for the DAF. And that is an opportunity for us as we continue to go forward. We are working hand in hand with JSC as one of the ways that we go forward, particularly for our high fidelity test environments for space. And then we are working with an in-house solution we call SWORD, which will help us get the reps and sets largely for the larger scale force package exercises. We are reusing capabilities as well. So when a spacecraft is designed, maybe by Air Force Research Lab, maybe by commercial industry, and it has life left, but its primary mission is done, although that's not our preferred option of how we get spacecraft, we will take used cars. And we have successfully used a number of them within our range, and we're getting the most out of them. They're now threat surrogates. They're now time, space, position sensors. We're finding ways to get new uses out of these assets so that our guardians, our orbital warfare operators, can be ready. We're looking at the Space Force generation cycle with hand in hand with Combat Forces Command. And so as they go forward, they needed a exercise series for how they could improve the readiness of their force packages. We call that Flashpoint. And at STARCOM, we host that event. We put it on a cadence that then supports their generation to commit those forces to the combatant commands. And then from a training and education standpoint, we've also looked at some innovative ways of how we can utilize academia. We've got a great partnership going with Johns Hopkins University. We're now in the third year of that program as part of a combined intermediate level education and senior level education program. It is a fantastic program, getting a Johns Hopkins master's degree and meeting all the joint requirements for JPME. So it's been a good transition. We're doing the same thing with our Squadron Officer School Replacement, which we call the Captain's Leadership Course. And so we are in the development phase for that now. That will eventually kick off here in the January timeframe. So you'll hear more about that as it comes forward. But it's going to use a similar model, partnering with an academic institution as the basis of that. So those are all things that we're doing with limited resources as we move forward. We certainly have a lot more to do.
Excellent. I got a couple more questions, and we'll get to the audience questions. I have 12 questions from the audience. I'll pick through those real quick. But I want to talk about the budget, and I want to ask General Tabor this question in particular. Anybody else can chime in if they desire. But as the lead programmer in the Air Force, please talk for a moment about the impact of the ongoing continuing resolution, now going into its second year, as it pertains to training and readiness. Specifically, how successfully can the DAF shift capability procurement and spending priorities within a CR?
Yeah, it's not ideal, right? I kind of alluded to this in my opening comments. I mean, having a year-long CRs is not the ideal way to do things. Everybody's relatively familiar with the restrictions that it puts on us in terms of expending money, especially on new program starts. But I think even more so than that, it's the signal that it sends really to our industry partners and the uncertainty that it engenders within the environment on what's going to be next. It's nice, I suppose, to have reconciliation funding coming in. It's somewhat looser money, as I mentioned, similar to OCO, but it is finite, and it does not actually go into our baseline budget. In other words, you get to a point where the reconciliation funds expire, and if you have used them to start up new projects, you will get to a point where that money is no longer there. In other words, it doesn't baseline extend into the next FIDEP. So that's a real concern for us as we get into this. I'm hopeful that we don't go down that path again. I suppose time will tell. We'll have another test here in about a month and a half as we get to the end of January to see what happens. But obviously, that has a lot of negative impacts to what we would like to do. As I mentioned, we're trying to balance the today with where we want to be tomorrow. And this restriction that CR's put on us really affects our ability to effectively do those things for tomorrow that we desperately need. So less CRs, more on-time budgets, please. Right, your congressman?
All right, that's probably enough on the CR. I'm going to ask one more question here, then we'll get to the audience questions. And this speaks to Secretary of War Hegseth's Arsenal of Freedom speech, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, from about a month ago. So the question, I'll target this at Mr. Lawhead and Mr. Sheehy and General Cantori, but everyone can chime in if they desire. In what ways can we better partner with industry and government R&D in accordance with Secretary of War Hegseth's speech? In particular, what do we need to do, either differently or better, again, without just throwing money at the problem, to pace or stay ahead of adversaries who are innovating rapidly? What can be done to energize the industrial base and our industry partners, many of whom are in the room here, to help us get needed capabilities and technology to the field faster?
Thanks, Yeti. So the fight of really tomorrow and into the future is multi-domain, right? It is sensing, making sense, and bringing effects from, through, and in all domains: air, space, cyber, surface, undersurface, et cetera. So to do that requires funding stability, for one. But even more than that, requires incredible coordination between the services, between the Air Force and the Space Force, and between the Department of War and industry. So when we think about capability development, we kind of think of a chart of these are the capabilities we need to sense, these are the capabilities we need to make sense, these are the capabilities we need to bring effects. Without integration with industry on what is the art of the possible and what is the timeline, without integration between and with the services, integration within the services, you can't figure out that, I actually don't have an ability to sense until 2032, but I've got an ability to affect in 2028. Well, that does me no good. If I can't connect a long-range kill chain from stem to stern, I may as well start to shove some things out further in the timeline so that they all align. That, to me, is the communication that's necessary. There are some incredibly powerful operational assessment capabilities within industry that we don't have. And sharing that data both between the services and industry is critical so that we can kind of continue that communication and integration vertically as well as horizontally. It's going to be critical to future capability development.
As we think about training, the all-domain environment and the systems that tie into that, we've got to have systems that connect and systems that integrate together. These proprietary systems and the one-offs out there costs the Air Force money, but let's be clear, it also costs the Air Force readiness and the Air Force's ability to continue to improve readiness. And so, as we go forward, we need to move away from, these disparate systems, and we need to prioritize open architecture and interoperability of systems that tie into JSE. And so, we can get after, the readiness training that we need to, and in one single environment that provides the best training to our aircrew.
So just to build upon that, certainly we're going to need to continue to collaborate together as a department. There's great opportunities here as we leverage opportunities going forward. And the culture needs to continue to grow, that the Space Force and the Air Force, along with the other joint force and the services, all collaborate together to find ways to continue to speed readiness opportunities. One thing I wanted to bring up is classification, especially things when you're trying to span the scope between unclassified to SAP level. Somebody asked me this morning, I think it was one of our Marine Corps colleagues, and she said, "You don't have an iPad that you're using to carry all your stuff?" And I said, "No, I have a binder because I can carry this in an unclassified space, and I can carry this into a SAP space." And it's like one of the few things that I can actually keep with me as I move from location to location. Well, that's completely not going to work when you're talking about moving data and garnering the power of data and analytics going forward. The operational test and training infrastructure team showed me this wonderful cloud diagram, how they would move data routinely between unclassified through secret, through top secret SCI up into the SAP realm. And it wasn't just a cloud chart, it was a storm front. There were so many different connections and clouds. It was technically going to be extraordinarily complex and challenging, and almost so much so that it just wasn't going to be useful to actually do something operationally. That's a wicked hard problem. And so as industry has solutions out there that can help us brave the storm front, find ways we can simplify and move data so that we can get it in the right time and place, that would be a radical transformation that would help us, especially in Space Force, as we struggle to take things that are highly classified and then pair them with things that are classified at a much lower level.
All right, we're going to go to the audience questions now. There's a bunch of them. We don't have time for all of them, so I'm only going to ask the extremely hard ones. And I'd like to thank Anonymous for most of the questions. Thank you, Anonymous. A lot of the questions actually are in your lane, General Quinn. I'm not going to ask you all the questions, but this one I think applies to AATC and STARCOM, even though the question actually has AATC in it. So here's the question from Anonymous. Given that AATC is a people command, how is AATC and STARCOM training the next generation of leaders to be adaptive and innovative, operating away from doctrine and finding new answers for themselves? I guess I should say, are you doing that, and if so, how?
So, first of all, well done being the moderator and picking the hard questions. I greatly appreciate being a moderator myself. So let's talk a little bit about education and training, and I'm going to reference back to my comments on being a product of the state university system here of Florida. Sometimes we intermingle education and training. The key, if I think about education, I tend to think of Air University within AETC's world. It is, no kidding, an academic environment. You're going to get a master's degree. But mixed in there, we're actually training you to do some stuff. We're going to run some war games. We're going to make you think critically. There's an education aspect to it, but there's also a training aspect. You're going to get sets and reps, even as you're going through a college or a university environment. On the other end of the spectrum, if we go to basic military training, I want my airmen to think critically as well. Now, maybe they won't be able to do that 7 weeks after being a high school student and coming in. We have to tailor that training. When we talk about training in the Air Force, if you just throw a room full of airmen together and you go, hey, we're going to do some training, somebody is thinking about red flag or a return of forces to the Pacific and 1,000-mile air-to-air engagements. That's training. Well, BMT is training as well, right? Boot camp, just knowing how to make your bed. We're going some pretty basic things with some of our brand new airmen. That's a spectrum. while I'm doing that training, they're also getting some education. So there's a mix of it throughout. At the end of the day, there are some very discrete opportunities. If anybody in here has been in the Air Force, there's Project X, little leadership labs where you get together as a team and you try to solve problems. None of those problems will ever actually happen in the real world. They're not anything that we're ever going to face, but it forces you to think critically. It forces you to work as a team. And it's a little bit of training, but it's a little bit of education. You're becoming a better leader, a better airman. And I like to see that through all of our programs, not just any one program.
So I had the benefit of having a minute to jot down some notes. So I think it all starts with recruiting. You know, in Space Force, we don't have a recruiting problem. We have lots of people that are applying. Now the challenge for us is being selective and making sure that we choose the right people with the right attributes for us to then continue to mold and bring into the force. So we start with recruiting, just as the Air Force does, but that is an area that we are going to continue to work going forward. We put out a document about 2 years ago called the Officer Enlisted Civilian Roles and Responsibilities for the Space Force. I don't know if you picked up or not, but when I refer to a guardian, I mean officers, enlisted, and civilians. They are part of our team and part of the fabric of what we want as a service. But they all have specific roles to be performed. And so we want to tailor the training so it fits the needs of what each of those different groups will perform. It all starts obviously within the accession sources for the officers, ROTC, the Academy and OTS, as we fine-tune those. Enlisted, the BMT partnership has been great as it then goes into the initial skills training. The enlisted are focused more on specific deep weapon system knowledge, whereas the officers are getting a larger breadth that we are giving them with, in fact, all officers are going to come in and get a cyber, a intel, and a space ops start during their initial officer training course now going forward. And then we're also starting something new, which we call our Guardian Civilian course. The idea is that civilians don't really ever get any specified training. And we realize that they come in at various levels of background and what they did prior to joining the Space Force. But we do need to get them level set, whether it's building a collaborative culture, whether it's helping them understand the nuance of the different mission sets we have. We want them to have a basic understanding, but also a sense of belonging. And so we're working hard to build that up front. Then, beyond that, we have career-long activities to help get after the innovation, whether it's war game participation, whether it's one of the many exercise series we have, or being part of the Space Force Generation model, which forces people to then get in, deal with these hard tactical challenges, and then figure out what's their role at the crew level, what's their role as part of a larger force package, and then what's their role when it all gets rolled together in a space mission task force, which is very similar to an air expeditionary task force concept. And so as we go forward, we are getting after all these different pieces. But again, it starts at the beginning, and then it continues all the way through an officer, enlisted members, or a Guardian civilian's career.
Can I add one thing?
Oh, absolutely, please.
Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me, for Anonymous, but more broadly for all the other Anonymous out there, I mean, it's not just what goes on in our formal education and training venues. I mean, it's unfair to ask, what are our training institutions doing to create these people? I mean, they are certainly doing a lot of that foundational work, but I mean, the way that we get the kind of flexible leaders that can deal with very complex problems is not by sending them to a class and then throwing them out into the world. It's about how we mentor them and bring them up on a day-to-day basis. So it's on all of us to do that, and that gets to the whole idea of empowering people to do the things that you're asking them to do, giving them the resources and the leeway to go and do it, and then not flying off the handle when it doesn't go exactly as we plan. And then this constant feedback cycle of teaching them the lessons learned. So yeah, I mean, I love the leadership reaction course and SOS and the various different things, but that's just the very beginning. I mean, it's what we do on a day-to-day basis with the people that work for us and help them to train others that is really going to make the difference.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's that continuation training that happens every day. Yep. It's just as important as what you get at the formal training courses. I'm going to shift gears to a JSID's PPBE question for our requirements lead and our programming lead here, Mr. Lawhead and General Tabor. Given the recent overhaul of JSIDS and the Defense Acquisition System, do you now foresee any changes to PPB&E processes to enable rapid acquisition to fill gaps beyond what we've already done in that lane to enhance readiness?
So let's start off with where we are in that process of killing JSIDS. It's like Monty Python. It's not dead yet. We still have JROCs. We will for a couple more months, but it is in the process. So OSD finishes up later this month, now that it's December, on here's what the new process is going to look like at the OSD level. The services have until February to do the service process and then an implementation plan. The bottom line is those requirements approval is being driven down to the service chief level. Great. What does that mean practically? There is one thing that hasn't been done yet, and this gets to the rapid acquisition piece. If you look at the requirements reform at the big level and CAPE's work on funding, they're establishing a jar, which we can all put quarters in, and then we have something to buy, but it's the Joint Acquisition Reserve.
Reserve, yeah.
I think. So the jar is supposed to be able to fund rapid acquisition. Awesome. What are we funding? Well, it's a cool sentence that says, hey, the new technology and things. What the requirements reform process has not yet defined is what is the son of JUONs and GEONs, that's Joint Urgent Operational Requirements and Joint Emerging Operational Needs. How do we get the combatant commander needs this capability? It's out there. Right now, how we do it is we completely upset the current budget and pull money from some other thing that was a validated requirement so that we can pay for this. Okay, that program's underperforming or it's slid to the right, so let's put it here. Now this program needs more money next year, so it doesn't work. So the jar will help us there in terms of funding. We still have a fundamental issue to get through, and that's how do we prioritize most important to least important right now, and what is it that we actually put money and capability, effort into developing, and where is industry in that process to go, yeah, we can do this in 6 months, or nope, that's at a TRL3 and it's going to take us a while to get out to where we can actually procure something. So that's what we're still spinning through. So a non-answer, the short answer to that question is, yeah, we're still working on that.
Yeah, I think I would add that the JSIDS process is going to change in some way. All for it. Great. At the end of the day, I mean, we're still in a cyclical process by which we have to create and turn in a budget every year. So whatever happens kind of outside that, I mean, welcome better, more well thought out inputs to that process so it's better. It seems to me, though, that what is missing from the conceptual, efficient process that we've been talking about is the actual ability to do things with the money that we want to do. In other words, when one program is underperforming over here, take that excess money and put it in program B over here that needs more money and can expend it. Right now, we don't have the flexibility to do that in a meaningful way. And that's by design. I mean, Congress likes to very conscientiously dole out the money for the things that it wants us to spend money on. So unless Congress is ready to kind of take the shackles off, I think that whatever process that we come up with is likely going to result in much of the same thing. I mean, we need a little bit more substantial change to give us the authorities necessary to do what we're saying we want to do.
Excellent. So this question is from Matthew. So thank you, Matthew, for identifying yourself. And I want to ask this of Shane and General Cantori. Anybody else can chime in as well. Question is, lethality is as much about brain power as it is about firepower. How is the Air Force assessing and developing human performance competencies, and answer this inside your lane, obviously, How are they assessing and developing human performance competencies for 21st century warfighting readiness?
So I think one of the things that we would like to get after as we go forward is, and I talked earlier about embracing big data, or embracing data and embracing AI, is using AI and along those lines more so, and injecting AI into that training pipeline from the very beginning, and using AI that'll follow that airman from a session to retirement, and along the way, their training is fed into this database, and between that database or that data and that AI, you can identify those specific shortfalls or gaps and seams in that person's training that aren't just across the board. And today, we kind of evaluate readiness based on, did somebody do that set or rep, and not often about how well they did that set or rep. I mean, there's a standard that we look towards, but there's nuanced differences in how Mr. Lawhead would accomplish something and compared to how horribly I would accomplish it in comparison. But over time, if you have the data and you have something like AI that is evaluating that data, it can identify those trends in training for those individuals, and it can, then we can tailor that training to fill those shortfalls that individual has, as opposed to if you get your currency, whether it's fixing an HVAC system or flying an airplane, then you're good. This will allow us to be more focused on identifying those shortfalls in the individual and tailoring the training to those individuals.
I think we're looking much the same way. I don't think we are as far along as the Air Force in terms of actually implementing that individual data and AI-driven analysis by individual. But I certainly think that's an area that we wish to go to. One of the things that you mentioned came to mind was decision superiority, trying to help our operators make the best choice with the limited information that they have available to them. That also assumes that they have access to information. So we're trying to work very hard to get a common operational picture that can explain what's going on in the space domain, whether we're talking the orbital regime, the spectrum, or in cyber. But then also, how do we tie that to the joint force? And so we're putting a lot of effort, especially with our younger captains, thinking how do they fit into you are not just a member of the Space Force, you are a member of the joint force. And so trying to grow a greater awareness of where our role fits, and so that they can be most effective in terms of making decisions. We've been working very hard on trying to push decision-making down to the lowest levels. Right now there's a big debate, a healthy debate within the service of centralized C2 versus decentralized and utilizing a mission command mindset. We are moving towards the mission command mindset, but that assumes that you have a common operational picture that gives you the foundation to make those decisions. So a lot of work going on right now within the service, and I think that we're still developing our way forward on that. But certainly that is an area that we know we have to move and make decisions faster than the adversary, and so it has to be a priority.
All right, I'm going to jump in as well. So our Chief Learning Officer for Air Education Training Command is in the second row, Dr. Walsh, and as soon as somebody said competency, she was like, yes. So I feel obligated to speak on this for just a second because it's something that we care about and that we focus on. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what Mr. Shee mentioned, which was your examples, I think, are throughout your career. I'm going to focus primarily on the initial training that we provide you. It's legacy, syllabus-based, number of training days. On training day 1, we're going to teach you this. On training day 8, you're going to learn this. On training day 13, you're going to prove you could do it. I like extreme examples. We also train Guard and Reserve. I could have somebody that was a civilian firefighter for 10 years that joins a Guard unit and wants to be a firefighter, and I'm going to send him to firefighting school just like an 18-year-old that's never even seen a fire truck. It's the same school. Now, granted, they're going to proficiency advance, they're going to learn a little bit faster. The problem that we have, not me, we, is the entire system is based on those training days and syllabus and graduation. If I can go just for a minute on sense of scale, assuming nobody washes out of basic military training, every Thursday, 50 times a year, except for Thanksgiving and Christmas, 864 airmen graduate on 10 o'clock in the morning, and by that afternoon or evening, they are on buses going to their follow-on training. And then that follow-on training has the exact same thing. If I go fully competency-based and everybody is graduating at different times, the entire system just explodes, because Base X isn't expecting a brand new airman to show up until 3 months from now. Well, if they have the competencies and they show up tomorrow, well, now I've got too many people there, the whole system, the orders. So in our military system, the bureaucracy that we've got, I could craft and create the perfect competency-based learning that everybody graduates on a different day. The entire system, though, all of us have to figure out a way to absorb that and accept it. It's not just a training command issue. So I don't have a solution. It's just an observation. I 100% support competency-based learning. I don't like things that are tied to a calendar or a number of hours. If you've learned it, I want you to move on and graduate. I just have to have somewhere to send you.
Excellent. This next question, I think, is, to me, probably the most interesting question I've read, and it's for you, General Quinn, but I think really anybody might have an opinion about this, because I don't think it's just for you. And I'm going to reword it slightly. How much time do you think about or spend communicating the risk in our gap between the arrival of CCA capabilities and what we're doing day to day, given the pacing threat and scenario, kind of looking into the future a few years from when we might fight with CCAs, but we don't have them now to train with? How do we fill that gap? And have you thought about that? What do we do about that?
I'll be honest, this answer, whoever anonymous asked this one might be extraordinarily disappointed in my answer, because I don't know that I've lost any sleep on it, because I don't have a demand signal from the combat air forces to train CCAs in any of my syllabi right now.
So there is a gap.
So I know that they're going to be out there at some point. I know that some human being is going to operate them somehow. It has not been added into any syllabi that we teach in AETC, and there has not been a demand signal put on me. I'm not trying to be reactive and just sitting back saying, hey, I'm not going to do anything until somebody asks me. I am aware that they're coming. I don't know, and I've actually asked, it was a year and a half ago when I asked the question. Lots of faces have changed. The question I asked was, is this something that is even going to be taught in a formal training unit, or is it going to be a follow-on training that an operations unit is going to teach? And I didn't get a good answer for that. So I don't know where that training is going to happen.
Yeah, I see your point.
Yeah, I think there's a ton unknown about CCAs. I mean, how we train them, how we employ them, how much we're going to fly them, where we're going to fly them. I mean, all of these things are not known. I spend a significant amount of time talking about this, mostly with congressional staffers. And I'll say on the first point, in terms of a gap, I mean, it's a gap that we're creating. I mean, we're not filling a gap, we're creating a gap. And so the answer to filling that gap is more of what we're doing right now, right? Which is, trying to bring on as many of the 5th gen fleet as we can, and accelerate 6th gen as quickly as we can. And then when we do add CCAs into the mix, get them in appropriately, whatever that might be. What I tell people is that we shouldn't fall in love with the idea that a CCA is a one-for-one swap with a manned tactical platform. Maybe it will be one day, but that's certainly not where we are with increment 1, nor is it where I think we'll be with increment 2. It's going to be something like in between a 0.25 and maybe a 0.85, but I can't tell you exactly where that is. But that's exactly why we have the experimental ops unit stood up to think about this on a day-to-day basis, and I think they're making a lot of progress. But until we really know what that's going to be, it becomes difficult to say how we're going to fill the gap and get to the CCA. But it is being worked on, and there's a lot of brain power put into it.
Copy. Vulture, you had something to add?
Yeah, just real quick. So, just to level set everybody, increment 1 CCAs flew their first flights with their manufacturers this summer. So the number of CCAs that we have actually DD-250 to the Air Force is 0. However, as General Tabor mentioned, the Experimental Ops Unit out in Nevada is already starting to think about how we're going to sustain them, how we're going to employ them, how we're going to train for them. What we have to make sure we do is to prevent that training gap from happening. So we do have to lead turn the ability to bring airmen into that career field to be able to execute as soon as they are out there to be able to do it with.
I was going to add that this is not a problem unique to CCAs. So whether it's any type of new technology that potentially could be a game changer, we have to think about what's the ramification for training and education of our force. We think about that every day. One of the things that we've changed within Space Force is when you come in, before you start your training, you have a TSSCI clearance. So we're teaching you about the basics of how the orbital warfare or the electromagnetic warfare, how the mission area is going and the trends so you can follow that. We teach them about the adversary so they understand more about the threat as it's constantly changing. That general awareness at least sets the conditions for us as we then have new technology, but we do struggle the same way. When do you introduce the next gen tech into the various training? So it's got to be some balance between education and training, but it's one that we're watching very closely as well.
Okay, this might be the last question. It's for you, Mr. Sheehy, and anybody else can answer as well. It's the easiest question of them all.
Thank you.
Yeah. You have discussed non-proprietary solutions a few times. The administration is clearly asking industry to come to the table with commercial solutions. How do you recommend industry address the administration's desires for commercial solutions and our need to have non-proprietary solutions? How do we square that circle?
Well, we need to create environments that industry solutions can plug into. And so it's not, I mean, non-proprietary is great, open architecture is great, but as a minimum, it needs to plug into the systems and integrate to the systems that we already have. And if you have a one-off system that is proprietary, that doesn't plug in, then that's a negative training, it's a negative towards us developing readiness as far as I see it. And so, non-proprietary is maybe a bit too far. We're not going to ask to have everybody's source code for everything that they do. But, as we go down these paths, and I'm dealing with it a lot right now with the point defense and counter small UAS of, we create and publish software development kits, so we show people what the plug looks like of the app that you have to plug it into, and there's ways to do this. I mean, my phone, wherever that thing is, I've got an app store that has billions of apps into it that plugs into the iOS that phone runs, and it kind of works the same way. Like, whether it's JSE or whether it's SUADs, as we think about point defense, the things that industry is making needs to at least integrate and plug into the things that we already have, and not just be a one-off solution that doesn't tie into what we already have, because that costs us money, and again, it costs us readiness.
Any other thoughts on that topic? All right, so we got about 2 minutes. I'll ask just a real easy question.
It's on 2 minutes long.
Open to anybody that wants to answer. How are you, and how are you thinking differently about warfare than maybe the people that went before you? What has changed in your thinking because of the changing character of war?
I'll jump in that first, and back to the counter small UAS. Like, what's happened in Ukraine and small UAS is changed the face of warfare, and the thing that keeps me up at night, and the thing that I think of is vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure, and vulnerabilities of our bases with regard to small UASs, or with regard, small UAS, one-way attack drones, all those things that, we have fought from sanctuary for so long that we're just used to it, and we're not, we've talked about air-based air defense, we've got, phalanx gun systems at bases in the Middle East, and we shoot down those random 155s that are indirect fires. But as far as a coordinated, massive attack on a base, like we haven't suffered that, and we haven't we haven't put investment to find a solution to protect our bases and ensure that those power projection platforms are available, because you can have all the air power that you need, but if you don't have a surface for that airplane to take off from, whether it's a runway or a taxiway, then it's absolutely useless. So I think that the advance of small UAS systems in Ukraine and the one-way attack drones that we see in that fight over in Europe have changed the face of warfare for us, and I think that everybody kind of sees that. That's very much the obvious answer, but that's the thing that keeps me up at night, and that's where I think that the face of warfare's changed. I think I ran out our time on that one.
Oh, I'll take 15 more seconds. That'll probably seem more like a minute. So I already talked about the multi-domain fight. That is not something that is easy to grasp, but we have to transition to the ability to bring effects from space, from cyber, from the air, from the surface, from maritime, from subsurface, all synchronized via battle management. So battle managing across that. The way we have developed systems in the past has been very kind of nose to tail, right? I had an F-15. When the F-15 ages out, I bring in the F-22. When the F-22 ages out, I bring in the F-47. We think now not in terms of platforms, but in terms of systems. And that platform-centric view leads us to finding solutions within that platform. We need to expand the solution set outside of just the platform. So when I had an organic kill chain in an F-16, I didn't really care what anybody else in the arena was doing. As long as I was doing my job, I could kill what I needed to kill. In a long-range kill chain, I need to first be able to be ensured that I can generate combat power. So I need some amount of base air defense. I need to have the tankers airborne where I need them, so I need some ability to keep that tanker alive and able to pass gas. And then I need a long-range kill chain, because the sensor that I'm using may be coming from space to give me the target for the weapon that I shoot, never even see the target, that then gets updated via a surface vessel or a subsurface vessel. So that long-range kill chain has to be preserved, and that doesn't come by a very domain-specific or platform-specific way of fighting war, and that is ultimately the big change that we see.
Last chance, commentary. Please join me in thanking our panel for their thoughtful answers.
Hey, Shane, good job. Thank you.